All right.
Good afternoon. I want to welcome everyone to today's City of Little Rock Board of Directors agenda meeting to set the agenda for May 16th, 2023. Members of the board, any questions on the consent agenda 1 through 19?
Yes, Mayor.
Director Miller?
Just a couple of questions. Like on resolution number 7, when we talk about sidewalk construction, they're not identified. It's just a pool of money to address sidewalk needs. Am I reading that right?
We'll bring Director Honeywell, but they are pretty much identified.
Are they?
Director Honeywell? This is remaining money from 3/8 cents.
Sidewalk, the list that we're talking about for the contract, this is sidewalk replacement. These are existing sidewalks that have become deteriorated over time that we are replacing. So we have a active list that we accumulate from requests from the public. So these locations are ones that we've received from the public replacing existing sidewalks.
Is there a list somewhere that?
Yes, sir. For this particular contract, we do have a list, and I'll be happy to distribute that to y'all this week.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And Director Miller, I would say that the majority of those are in wards 1 and 2.
Okay. Question on resolution 10, the Dunbar community, well, that's the East Little Rock Community Center. We had East Little Rock neighborhood meeting yesterday, and they wanted to know what's getting ready to happen over at East Little Rock Community Center. So,
Sure. And again, a lot will happen with after you all approve this next Tuesday to help us kind of decide what are the major issues that we need to address. And a lot of these, and you can see, and I'm very excited that we're moving forward these community center projects, but a lot of it will be, HVAC type work over in East Little Rock. I know we would like to renovate those classrooms so they become community space. So we'll rely a lot on our contractors to help us, our engineers to help us design, but this is the first step.
would that be the same response for resolution number 13 in Dunbar?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Director Warwick?
Thank you, Mayor. There's a lot of exciting things that are in this agenda that I think go to the quality of life in our city. And items 4, 5, and 6 are taking care of the right-of-ways in a lot of our city. And my question, well, I complimented on the work that was being done in Southwest a couple weeks ago or last week.
Last week.
Yeah, it was a beautiful job that they did. Joan, however, was not so happy with University. I don't know if she reported that or not, but it was not mowed. But with this contract, how many times will this contractor mow the right-of-way? Is this twice a year, once a year? What is the?
Director Honeywell, if you'll give an update on all mowing and also update Director Adcock on University.
Certainly. With this contract, I believe it's 6 to 8 times that they're required to mow. It's not just twice, so we have them mowing on not a weekly basis, but it's a pretty regular basis throughout the growing season to try to keep this right-of-way as low as possible, as well as they pick up the trash before they mow so they don't end up mowing.
Yeah.
In regards to University, oh, I'm sorry, did you have a question?
That was the beautiful part. They picked up the trash and then mowed.
Yes,
We've been just plowing through it, and it straws it everywhere. So I think they did a good job.
Thank you. I'll let them know. The University that we spoke about. There are sections of South University near the interstate interchange and where it runs into Chico that are still within the Highway Department right-of-way. There's different areas that are different responsibilities. I think some of the locations, we've contacted them about the area that we spoke about. So we're working with them to try to get them to do maintenance as regular as possible in the areas that they're responsible for. And we've also spoken with our contractor about the areas that would be our responsibility.
This is all the way from First Tee, all the way down to where the split is.
Yes, ma'am.
It is probably going up to waist high on me right now.
Okay.
And you've got all kinds of trash in there, people dumping in it. So I would like for you to let me know when that's going to be mowed, please.
Yes, ma'am. We'll do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The other thing that I'd like to say about the mowing is they used equipment that would mow right-of-ways as opposed to the big honking tractors that y'all come through with, and it's kind of hard to hit all the angles and all that and the weed eating. So they did a good job, in my opinion, but I'm excited that the people in particularly Ward 7 will be able to see right-of-way mowing 6 or 8 times a year.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
mean, that's beautiful, rather than spraying and killing grass. We
I
all
agree.
hated that.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, as Virgil talked about, 2 alert centers, or 2 community centers, it looks like we've got some revitalization efforts going on at a number of our community centers, and this might be a good time to highlight what all we're doing, either today or next Tuesday. I'm not sure when you want to do that presentation, but
Let's, since we have, I think that's what the agenda meeting's for, so let's do a high-level Leland. But I think as Mr. Moore has already shared, a lot of it is Director Wyrick, nuts and bolts, and HVAC and things of that nature. So not a lot of glamorous things, but things that will make those community centers more vibrant.
well, I did read some stuff about Southwest that we're going to be doing some improvements inside to make it easier for the citizens to meet and do things.
Can we get Leland to give the overview? So we don't have to spend that time next week.
Good afternoon, Mayor.
Just a
City Board.
brief overview, and then if there are any details, you can email directly to the city board.
Absolutely. So would you like me to run through each community center or start with Southwest?
Yes, just brief overview.
Southwest, the main focus will be the indoor gym, renovating the gym floor, the banquet hall divider, curtain wall, all the aesthetics inside, painting, flooring, lighting, blinds, really bringing it up in quality and standard. One thing that we are looking at from an architectural standpoint is the existing game room is quite a bit dated, and looking at how to make it more functional for meeting space and birthday parties, and opening it up, if feasible, to the pool. And then the pool, outdoor pool, needs quite a bit of maintenance work, a lot of renovations to it to keep it to today's standards as well. So that's Southwest. Dunbar is relatively the same. As you're aware, Dunbar doesn't have a swimming pool. The big need there is the HVAC. I've been told that it's upwards of $800,000 maybe to install new HVAC. As you know, Dunbar is one of our oldest community centers and most utilized. So this is a big thing there, as well as the aesthetics of the facility, flooring, carpet, painting, stuff like that. East Little Rock was covered slightly. It's looking at removal of some of the facilities outside that are still there that need to be removed, that are not being utilized anymore and past time for being able to be renovated, as well as updating our classrooms there and looking at repurposing them from a classroom to more of a special event meeting space that we get a lot of requests for. As well as the other big thing there would be updating the gym. The floor is, I believe, maybe even original And so those are those community centers. Stevens is just a real quick update in terms of painting, gym floor again, updates on the standards in terms of blinds and lighting and whatnot. Let's see, and then West Central wasn't included in that package. Obviously, it's our newer facility.
Mayor, I have one more request, and that's on item 17. And I know it's just setting the date for a public hearing, but it's an annexation. And I would like to have more details on what that area entails. Item number 17.
Yes, ma'am, we'll get you details.
And then, Joan, are you going to have 21 separate?
Yes.
Mayor,
Joan and I want to have 21 separate.
before we
21 is a plan, it's already separated.
I have a question on item 16.
Looks like it's grouped with 20 through 23.
But we take up planning items separately, each planning item. Mr. Moore?
On item 16, I'm going to pull that off the agenda at this point, so that will not be going forward.
Yeah, I have a question of Mr. Moore.
Yes, Director Adcock?
Mr. Moore, I would like to have Mr. Honeywell look at this property to give us an estimate. This property is 10 lots in one group. It has no infrastructure whatsoever. I hate to see us do neighborhood revitalization in an area that is going to take such a large amount of money to provide streets in this whole area. And I would like to know from Mr. Honeywell what that cost would be to provide the infrastructure to this 10 lots. It says 10 properties, but it is 10 lots. So
Right, and we'll provide that, but again, this won't be before you, so you won't be seeing it this Friday, obviously, but and obviously John and his staff are pretty busy at this point.
okay, and another thing, in reading the minutes of the land bank meeting, it seems like that this gentleman was purchasing these because he was going to be given the infrastructure by the city. And I know some of our developers in West Little Rock would love to have infrastructures with their projects.
Well, I spoke to the attorney, Mr. Overton, that represents the city at the land bank, and he was, I think, very clear that by the land bank transferring this property, there was no nexus with the city providing infrastructure. So I believe that was definitely something that the applicant wanted, but it was very clear that there was no correlation with the city providing.
Okay, so you don't think we need to contact him to express that to him again?
I think he's pretty aware of it.
The applicant.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, Director Lewis?
I was just going to say, I've been in contact with the applicant, and housing has as well, so all those concerns have been addressed. He wasn't promised any money for infrastructure.
Thank you, Director Lewis. Director Webb?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a question for Director Couch on item 8. And when I was reading the resolution, it was very specific, which I appreciated about a lot of the parks. And then there were a couple of lines, one that said neighborhood parks, and then another one that said trails. And I wondered if that means that that is to be determined, or what exactly that meant.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So for the neighborhood park site amenities, what that is referencing is there's tons of neighborhood parks that need new picnic tables, trash cans, drinking fountains. The list is too much to try to put it all into one line, right? So it's across the neighborhood parks in terms of where the need is most in terms of those new site amenities. So it's various parks, just kind of how it says there. Trail infrastructure, so as you may not be aware, we have several RTP project grants right now in terms of grant-funded trail projects. They were all not fully funded, and so This allows for us to, as we get into the design and we see that we maybe need an extra 50 grand for the trail project to make it a complete project, this allows us to put a little bit of money into those various trail infrastructure projects. So it's, I guess you could list out individual trail projects based on those RTPs or the existing projects that we have, but it just depends on the amount of money that is needed at that time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I
Director
think,
Phillips.
Director Phillips, okay. Yeah.
Director Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor. And I was a few minutes late, but I do have questions on number 7 and number 8 as well. So if Director Couch could, maybe that's not for Director Couch, but on the write-up on number 8, it lists the Chenal and Gamble improvements as part of the zoo improvements. And I was trying to make sure I understood how that was related to the zoo under item 8.
Director Couch.
Yeah, that's a mistake.
Yeah, or maybe Susan Altrui might have that.
Yeah, that's a mistake. Thank you, Director Phillips. We'll fix that.
Okay, so that just should be deleted from the resolution, correct?
Correct.
All right. And then, thank you. And then on number 7,
See,
item number 7, I think that relates to sidewalks. 2 questions there. One, have we determined which sidewalks will be improved? And then secondly, I understand that this money is being, is from the 3/8 cent sales tax. And I know a few months ago, we got an update that money was about depleted. Can we get an update on whether there's any, where we are with the use of the funds from the 3/8 cent sales tax from, I guess it was 2010 or 11?
sure. Director Phillips, when we say depleted, it means that there's no additional money to do additional projects, but as the Vice Mayor mentioned to me yesterday, because we have to develop this schedule that you mentioned even last week. And so some of the projects from even the 2011 sales tax, because we did them in, again, 3 phases, are just coming on board. So all of the dollars have been allocated, but you will be seeing, even on this agenda, you saw some projects from the, I think it's even the first item or second resolution regarding Chico Road. So that was part of the 2011 sales tax, but because we have to put these in a schedule and we do them every 3 years, that's why you're just starting to see those. So we will work on a schedule for the first phase, but all of the dollars have been allocated from the 3/8 cent.
Okay, so, and I guess no super rush, but if there is a schedule for the remaining projects of the already allocated funds from the 3/8 cent sales tax, I would like to see that if that's doable between you and staff. And then the first question relates to have we determined which sidewalks will be improved, or how will that be determined?
Yeah, John spoke to it earlier, so we're going to send out a list on Friday.
Okay. I missed that part. Okay, thank you. That's all I had, Mayor.
Thank you.
Well, hold on. Let me make sure. The list he's sending out, is that the final list, or is that a list where we could provide comment?
Final.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Director Walker, is your hand still up?
No, thank you.
All right.
Mayor,
Director Miller?
I guess I ought to be raising my hand.
Yeah, Director Miller, I need you to raise your hand.
All right, I'm sorry, Mayor.
I appreciate you.
Let me ask you, and this is just procedure, maybe I could have asked this just, offline, but on resolution 18 and 19, when we make reappointments, I thought that was always, done an executive session, or have we already done this and I slept or something?
We're ratifying what the AMP Commission has done as it relates to the AMP Commission. The AMP Commission went into an executive session, and they are submitting these names to us to ratify. So that's on 18, same as 19.
Okay, so when it's.
They're both self-appointing boards,
Got you. Thank you, Mayor.
but it can't be official to you all. Say yes.
Mayor, my hand was up. I don't know what's the problem with it being recognized or shown. I wanted to go back to the sidewalk work that a couple of my colleagues have previously discussed. And Bruce, maybe you can tell us, when we use sidewalk replacement as part of our reentry efforts, or reentry work, reentry program, are we utilizing PIT funds? Are we utilizing funds from the general funds? Or are we using funds for the 3/8 sales tax we're talking about? Is there a way to differentiate that sidewalk replacement work from the work that we're doing with our reentry program?
Sure. When we started, as you would remember, and some board members, this was really a pilot, and we did use some PIT funds to help get it started. That no longer happens. And the reason we, and I really give Director Honeywell credit and his staff, there's so many requests that, this doesn't impact the sidewalk replacement crew that we have in place. They're still working, 40 hours a week and fully staffed. There is some turnover. But this is just to try to get some of the requests that are in the queue accomplished at the end of the day.
Well, thank you. And this may not be a fair question for you, but with respect to us having so many turnover positions with that work, have we been able to transition some of our reentry participants into permanent jobs within that department?
Yes, yes, and that's what when I talk about turnover, a lot of them go into full-time positions in street ops or solid waste.
And if you had to guesstimate, can you just give us, it may not be a fair question for you, but do we have any idea, or are we tracking those numbers to demonstrate the impact of reentry programming for ex-felons? Are we tracking that? And if so, can we get that collective number sometime shortly if it's available?
We are, and we'll provide that.
Thank you.
Director Wire, is your hand still up?
I just put it up again.
All right.
I have a report on item number 23, probably from Jamie. I'm a little bit familiar with this area, and this is.
Brad Jordan's is here today.
Hey there. Item number 23.
Yes, ma'am. Number 23.
Yeah, I'm a little bit familiar with this area. Why would we say that manufactured home was what we wanted to do here? What's the developing story from that?
I think it was because, if I remember at the Planning Commission, it was because it was in our ETJ. There was some manufactured homes in the area. I know that there was certainly opposition that came out to oppose this. They said, things like there were larger tracts of homes out there, and they didn't feel that putting a single wide home on this property would increase their property values. Whether that's the case, I don't know, but I know that was brought up.
That's kind of what I was wondering about. I'd like to hold this one separate as well. There's a lot of beautiful homes that are around this area, and of course, there's vacant land as well. So there potentially will be some people that will be here in opposition to it. So I want to make sure they have an opportunity to comment. Thank you.
Director Adcock, is your hand?
Yes, I would like to have item 21 left separate, please.
Yes, ma'am.
And then also on item 27, I would like to look at the pictures.
All right, on item 27, we'll have the pictures for item 27.
And I'm assuming, Mayor, along with those pictures, it would indicate what ward is located in, as we've previously done. Am I correct, Bruce?
Correct.
Okay, we'll get the pictures emailed to everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Any questions on item 29, members of the board? Questions on item 29? Seeing none. Ms. Cox, if you'll come give us the ARPA update.
That's next Tuesday, Mayor.
All right. All right, meeting adjourned.
Hands up.
Oh, all right, Director Peck.
Sorry, slow. Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question about Little Rock Cares. I actually got an email from an acquaintance yesterday, and I wasn't able to give him the answer. I did reach out to Mr. Moore, and he told me that we're sitting on somewhere in the neighborhood of $300,000, and that he had compiled a list of organizations that we should perhaps use to disperse the funds. But I told this acquaintance when he reached out to me that I would read his concerns. He said some introductory things about me, and he said, can you please find out something about the Emergency Relief Fund that the city solicited donations for? My wife and I donated on Monday, right after the tornado, and again later in the week. But I have seen or read nothing about what has happened to the funds. I can find nothing substantive on the city's website. An email to the mayor has gone unanswered, and an inquiry to a Democrat reporter has not elicited any information. That money needed to go out quickly and as directly as possible to those affected by the tornado. It is inexcusable that 5.5 weeks after the event, nothing has apparently been done, or if the funds have been dispersed, there's been no public accounting for it. People were and are still hurting, and whatever assistance is available should be in their hands by now. If you can find the time to look into this, I would appreciate it. It certainly struck a note with me last night when I was at the Walnut Valley Neighborhood Association meeting. And I think you all know that that was probably the neighborhood the hardest hit. So regarding just people with needs, what are we doing with those funds? What are we going to do with them? Here, it's been almost 6 weeks now. What is the plan?
Sure. First and foremost, to whomever wrote that, we definitely appreciate what they contributed. We shared today's Friday, this past Friday, that now that all the funds have been allocated, that we will be, as Mr. Moore already shared with you, be dispersing that to a number of different nonprofit organizations that have been directly helping those tornado victims. And the main goal is to make sure that those funds go directly either to an organization that's been helping tornado victims or directly to tornado victims. And we shared at the last press briefing that we would have that announcement on all the details at this upcoming press briefing that's already scheduled. So all of that details will be out. Because one of the main thing is when you're getting those kind of dollars, you want to make sure everything is, all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, because, and to get those back into the hands of those that are most affected.
I understand that, and I appreciate the answer and the explanation. I do think it would be a good idea if we perhaps posted something on the littlerock.gov website encouraging people to stay tuned, especially for the next briefing. Is the next briefing next Tuesday?
We did it next Friday.
Every other week?
Yeah.
I think that.
And we'll make sure that's on the website, but yeah.
I think that person would be relieved. I mean, I kind of understand his frustration. Okay, thank you.
Aaron, if you'll make sure that's just on what we did last Friday is on the website. And again, we do appreciate to the person who wrote that to you, we definitely appreciate them. If you'll communicate that to them, that we appreciate them. Director Adcock?
Yes, Metropolitan Housing Alliance. Last week, when we had all those people come before us, it was very obvious that the city staff was doing everything they possibly could. But it looked like that Metropolitan Housing was where a lot of the problems was existing. I know that we have a new member of that board, but I would like for us to give some consideration of looking at that makeup of that board and seeing if maybe we might want to reappoint some people. And I believe that Mr. Carpenter said that we were able to recall people off of that board if we need to. I think it's time that we got very serious with the lives of these people at Big Country. And evidently, if we're not the one that's holding up them getting the vouchers and housing, then I think that we need to make every effort to make sure that Metropolitan Housing is addressing the needs of our community.
Yes, ma'am. Just one thing before I get back, just because I'm getting some information that I'm looking at. Just also, Director Peck, another reason why, because we wanted to have a legalized MOU, and I know we're working with the city attorney's office. So just a lot of things when you're dealing with those funds. I just want to make sure that you're aware of that. And I want to give credit to the city attorney's office for working on that. We're grateful, and it'll be at the next briefing. Then to answer, is yours germane to Director Adcock before I answer her?
No. It's something else. It's back to the CARES funds.
I would like to hear from Mr. Carpenter.
Well, we're finalizing the MOU, that's all it is. But Director Hines?
I think as the topic of the Little Rock CARES funds comes to mind, to date, since my ward's one impacted, I haven't had any input. Who all made the selection on these other than you and Mr. Moore? It seems like this board should have been consulted to see, I think we've got some places where FEMA and people's insurance isn't covering people. I've heard stories of people that have lost their cars because they were only carrying liability insurance. They didn't have collision. FEMA, if say it's a family of 3 or 4 and they had 3 cars and they lost 2 of them but still had one operable, FEMA won't cover it. I think we've got some gaps that we need to make sure are addressed. And before we go out and start making announcements, I'm kind of surprised the board hasn't been consulted on this, to my knowledge, especially the ward directors who had impacts from the storm.
Mr. Moore, if you'll answer Director Hines' question.
Yeah, I want to clarify. What I did and what I relayed to Director Peck was I knew of the organizations. Let's take the van. Early, first day, they open up the shelter over at Hall High School. So we knew, and really working with emergency management and others, we compiled a list of organizations that were very Emmanuel Baptist Church and all. So there's been no decisions that have been made at all. This was just an initial effort to be able to identify organizations. Now, the concept of how we get money to individuals and how much, I think that's what I believe the city attorney's office is really going to have to be helpful with. And that's why we talked about, and this is, I think you were here, but we talked about maybe a third party that's not necessarily affiliated with the city. So notice that, so I just want to clarify, no decisions have been made about any disbursements. This was just an initial effort to identify organizations, a comprehensive list of organizations that emergency management and others that have worked with since March 31st.
Thank you.
And again, in addition to Mr. Moore, I've got to be very clear to the members of the board, is the dollars are strictly for those identified couple different things. One, emergency management has weighed in. They are working to make sure everything's in line with FEMA, that we don't get in any trouble with FEMA from that standpoint. Let's put that there. Two, we've involved legal to make sure whatever we do is we're in legal compliance of what we do. Three, we also have to understand that there will be opportunities in addition to those organizations, Director Hines, there'll be opportunities for individuals to seek direct funding. But also, I think we all understand that's going to be on a case-by-case basis. And I mean, we could essentially, and that may be a determination that we got to figure out as well. We can give, while we've received a very good amount of money, but that money can go very quick when you go to a direct person, because ex-resident may be a whole lot of money. It could wipe out half of it. Y resident, it could be, 10,000 could go a long ways. And so that's the reason why, there has been a decision that most of the money needs to go to organizations that have been helping out tornado victims in that way. And so we also can't allow bureaucracy to get in the middle of this. That's the reason why. So we can make sure, again, to Director Peck's standpoint, we don't want to be sitting here 60, 90 days and we're sitting on money. We got to get this money out the door. So I want to make sure everything's very transparent. There are some decisions that have been made in concept, but we can't do anything until we get the legal pass-through from Tom, as well as going back to emergency management, make certain that we don't get in any trouble or challenges with FEMA and what we're already doing. So there have been decisions made in concept that we do have to get out the door, just like we've done before. And I think this board is given, management leeway to move forward on a situation like this that does not require board approval because it's going back to the community. But if the board wants that, I just want to caution that adds more layer at a time than what Director Peck was just sharing. But again, in concept, the plan is most of the money goes to organizations. There will be an opportunity for those that can seek direct funding. But in the grand scheme of things, many of you all know, and the residents, particularly those most affected, know that one person may be 10,000, another person could be 200, and we're talking about 320,000. So I don't want anybody to walk away to think there's going to be a program that every resident that's been affected could get that type of direct assistance. That's the reason why the decision in concept is that most of the money goes back to organizations that have been assisting these affected victims. Director Peck.
And it, never in my wildest imagination did I think it would go to individuals. I don't see how that could be fair or.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was hoping it would go to organizations. And thank you to Vice Mayor Webb. I think one organization to take a very serious look at is Arkansas Community Foundation.
Yep.
I mean, there's so many good people, but it's and maybe Lance would have some input on some of the areas in his ward that were affected. But I'm telling y'all, all you got to do is go to one of those meetings, and if you just want your heart ripped out of your chest. But I get it. I would not even dream of giving this to individuals. We have to work with organizations. I just think people are anxious to see that we're so quickly, donate, or willing to donate, that we get on it.
Yes, and we'll have all the details fleshed out before we present, and what we'll do, the commitment we'll make before we present the board. We'll send an email to the board, make sure you know the detail. I guess there's a lot of things that are going on to get to that point so we can get it fleshed out. We'll get those details. Once those decisions have been made, Mr. Moore and I will send a memo or email at least a day or two before that briefing. Any additional questions on that while we're here?
While you're on that, Mayor, I just want to commend you and Mr. Moore for, I think, trying to address his needs as quickly as possible, but also making sure we have some steps in place to guard against fraud via misery merchants who try to come in and take advantage of opportunities like this, who may not be victims or may not be providing the services that they claim to be providing. So I want to commend you two guys for your due diligence with respect to putting something in place that's going to be transparent and it's going to be protective of us those of us who've been impacted by it and those of us who are giving and helping support the giving out funds and resources to help people rebuild their lives. So I just commend you guys for it. And I know it's not going to move as fast as a lot of us would like to see it move, but I think you guys are putting in the necessary steps to guard against fraud and those other kinds of negative things that could be associated with tragedies like this.
That being said, we'll get a memo. Thank you so much, Director Richardson. We'll get a memo that lays out the path forward before we make the presentation. If you have any input you want to share between now and then, because we have to move with deliberate haste, please send Mr. Moore and myself a note. Director Webb.
Thank you. And Mayor, you were just starting to address this, but I think what I heard you all say was that we would be notified after the decisions were made, but before it was announced. And what I heard my colleagues say was that we wanted input into what the decisions were going to be. And then you were just starting to say that if we did have input, I mean, I know my ward was hit. I know a lot of organizations who spent a whole lot of money, but who also raised a whole lot of money and are in pretty good shape. And so I just want to make sure we do this properly, but I think we want to have the input on the front end and not on the back end.
No, and that's what I just, as you just shared, I shared. So please share some input. And again, I just want everyone to understand we got to make some decisions. And so if you can get us some input tonight, tomorrow, otherwise we'll be waiting another 2 weeks or so. So,
Mayor, I can give you my input right now. Like I said, I think that we need to make sure how this money gets dispersed through these organizations is going to help people where they have gaps in coverage, whether it's insurance, lack of insurance, where FEMA doesn't cover. And it's not just going to an organization that's got a high administrative cost. I want, this money needs to end up at the end of the day with the people most impacted by the storm and the storm damage.
Totally agree with you.
We've got people who still, I still drive through some of the neighborhoods right now that still have trees down in backyards, and insurance, if the tree's not on your house, doesn't cover getting that tree. And the volunteers missed them, but that's the kind of things I'm talking about from an input standpoint. I want to make sure the things I've heard of are people's cars who can't be replaced because they only carry liability, issues with shortfalls in insurance, renters who didn't have renter's insurance, or the renter insurance doesn't cover their goods getting refurbished, their clothes. There's a lot of gaps in what FEMA does and what we do, and hopefully that's what we're divining. And it seems to me this money was donated as to a charitable, in the charity sense, and we should be able to disperse it, fairly easily. I think we're getting caught up in our own bureaucracy here, and that it should be a pretty easy deal to, if FEMA doesn't cover it and insurance doesn't cover it, it seems pretty logical that we should be able to cover it and find an organization that can help us do that.
And that's, and Director Hines, that's exactly what the team's been working on.
Okay, but here's the deal. If the team's been working on it, why haven't we been advised of it? And then we wouldn't have these questions.
And the reason, and Director Hines, again, we're going through legal, there's a whole lot of other stuff. And as we shared, it's been a few weeks, and time is of essence to each person that's been affected, because it may be a few weeks for us, it's an eternity for others. So again, I ask you for a little grace on that as well. It's not like another project. And so I see where you're coming from, and totally, no one's disagreeing with anything you're saying, and we're trying to get that done. I think that's the goal, is to get the dollars out to as many people that's been affected in a timely fashion, and we definitely solicit input. So please, if you'll just email that input, and we'll make sure that as much as your input as Director Webb's, Director Peck's, Wyrick, Adcock, Compuris, Miller and Lewis and Phillips and Richardson are all included. Director Adcock?
Yes, I'm still waiting on Mr. Carpenter to answer what our what can we do about metropolitan housing and the voucher situation?
The Metropolitan Housing Alliance is effectively a state agency, even though we do the appointments of it. We have the authority to appoint the board. If there is nonfeasance, misfeasance, or malfeasance, we have the authority to remove one or more members of the board. However, to do so, we have to give 10 days notice that we are thinking of doing that and what we think the problem is, and then they come and speak to us before any action is taken.
Mayor, I'd like to ask that they come and speak to us about why Big Country is not receiving the vouchers.
We can make that request.
Thank you.
Director Phillips?
Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor. I want to kind of make sure I understand Director Adcock's question and the city attorney's clarification. If I understand it correctly, Tom, if we went through that process, that's a one-by-one process, right? That's each commission member? Is that correct?
You don't just get rid of the whole board. You're not limited to dealing with one person, but each person has to have a challenge made to their actions, and then they get a chance to defend their actions.
Yes.
Okay, and Director Adcock, and I'm not questioning what you're trying to do. I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. Are you requesting people from MHA to come to just kind of give us an update, or are you trying to start that process that Tom just mentioned?
I'm asking each of the board members to come and address us. And then if we find that their information is correct, then we will move forward with that. If we find that they are not fulfilling the needs of this community, then I think that we have a right to look at what we need to do next.
Understood at that point. Thank you, Director Adcock. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Then, Mayor, just to add a point back to the Little Rock Cares Fund, it seems like we're all on the same page and trying to get to the same point. And I guess part of what Director Hines, if I understood what he was saying correctly, is that the organizations that have been chosen, when staff is communicating with them, that they understand what our intentions are, and then you just relay it back to us if they're able to fulfill those gaps that he was mentioning. That's what I heard, and if I understood you right, Mayor, is that what the plan is?
Correct. I mean, if those dollars, there will be an MOU. If those dollars are expended to an organization, it's with the express intent that those dollars go directly to those affected victims from the organizational standpoint. Secondly, if there's an opportunity to do direct funding that has to go through a particular vehicle, it could be Arkansas Community Foundation, it could be whomever, and they will handle those logistics. Because again, our team, in addition to debris monitorization and FEMA assistance, our team is working on all this. We'll get these details situated. Because even just at the end of the day, even just now, we just heard two different things. We've heard some who want direct assistance, some who don't want direct assistance. That's why the decision is that we're going to do a little bit of both. And so as you have intentions, Director Webb, because I know you got a lot of folks that you were working with, and Director Peck, just send out, and I'm pretty certain most of those same folks are on the list already, just to kind of be clear on that standpoint. But just let us know to double verify.
Okay, and that's why I just wanted clarity for those watching and those reporting that what was being requested is what's being done and what will be reported back to us. That's what I was getting at.
Correct.
All right, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
So,
Director
Mayor,
Richardson.
my hand is still not working. Just following up on Director.
No, I just saw a Director. That's why I called on you. I see you.
All right.
Then it's Director
Thank you,
Lewis.
sir.
'Cause she's asked if I saw hers.
Following up on Director Phillips' question with respect to Jones' request for MHA board members coming and doing, are we interviewing them, Joan, or that specific? Are we just limiting our questions to Big Country? Because they're involved with a lot more projects than Big Country. So I'm not sure I'm clear. I understood what it is that we will be asking of them.
So let me help out, Director Rich. I think what we heard from Director Adcock, she would like to hear from as a whole, MHA, on why there's some challenge, why haven't we cured the challenges at Big Country? I've also heard from Director Adcock, in addition to MHA as a whole, she would like to hear from each individual commissioner. That's what she's asked for. And again, just make sure we're all level setting. We can definitely request the director to come, and we can request all the commissioners to come, and we'll make those requests for them to come here. As it relates to what I also heard from Director Adcock, she would like wants to know the process of making some changes to the structure of the board. Is that correct, Director Adcock?
Correct.
And so she asked that of the city attorney, members of the board, because this has come up before. I'm old enough to remember that it's come up before, and that, you like that, didn't you, Director Wire? What has to happen, I want to make sure I relay the information back to the city board. I, as mayor, have to bring a person up, and then there's an actual hearing, and you, as the board, have to vote in public on each person. And so,
Mayor, I don't think that's right. I think if a majority,
that's what was told to me last time. Now, if that's changed, I
don't remember ever saying that. If the board takes an action, I think you can do it unilaterally. But if the board takes an action to consider the removal of a member, then I think it's incumbent upon the board to have the member come forward. And then that's when you get the 10 days and you've got to give specific information. The question that has come up that's caused the most concern is about asking to take MHA assets and send them to a nonprofit organization without a formal vote of the board. That's the one that's been presented to us. It's the most disconcerting.
Well, to me, it sounded, and I don't know if it's sunlight outside or what, for some reason I'm not comprehending this the way I just heard it. It seemed to me like Director Adcock was indirectly saying that we have these folks come up there and we use their talking points or answers or non-answers as a basis for removal or keeping them on the board. That's where I heard it when I think she first brought to you the question to you. She addressed it to you legally with respect to our authority over the board. So that's the way I heard it.
Director Richardson, that couldn't happen. You can't bring somebody up, find out something in the conversation, and then say, we're going to remove you. You've got to give notice first as to specifically what you're concerned about. Then they're allowed to make a defense, and then if you take action, that's when you do it. So I took it as Director Adcock was asking to have the director and the members come forward because there's some questions we want to ask. If that leads to something further, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Well, thank you for that clarity, Tom, because I was confused because it was couched within the confines of board approval or board removal when the question was first presented. And I go back and look at the video of this and see, but I heard it a little bit differently. And I'm glad you made that clarification for those of us who are watching it and learning.
Tom, what I would ask, because I know this is getting confusing, please send the rules, because as we all know, and again, this is not anything from Tom, certain things happened a few years ago that aren't necessarily matching up today. So all we need, and again, that's not you, Tom. What would like from you is send the board who have an interest in this, the rules to operate from. I think that'll clear up a lot. Director Lewis, then Director Phillips, then Director Lewis, Director Computers, then Director Phillips.
I was just going to say briefly, speaking on behalf of one of the women that came last Tuesday, MHA is working with her. There was some back and forth where she ended up changing her mind on the unit that she wanted initially. But as of today, MHA has informed me that she picked up another voucher and she has 3 referrals for other apartment complexes because the one that she was going to move into apparently is shutting down in June. So she is being worked with. I've been talking to that lady as well, so I just wanted to give you that update.
Thank you. Director Compuris, then Director Phillips.
Tom, to the question that you brought up about the transfer of property for the Metro Housing Alliance to that private corporation, I'd like a position paper on that, the legality of it, and if you don't feel that it is appropriate or legal, our recourse in directing it to the federal government for their review.
Director Phillips.
Excuse me. Thank you again, Mayor. I hope not to add to the confusion, but I think things have been said, and maybe Tom's memo to us will clarify, but I want to state it for those who watching the way I understand what has happened. Director Adcock was asking for people to come, commissioners or the executive director, MHA, to come speak to us to just inform of what's going on at MHA as it relates to the vouchers and their normal processes. What I understood is based on that conversation, and Tom, correct me if this is incorrect, based on that conversation, if we, the board as a whole, majority of the board, decided that we didn't think MHA was headed in the right direction, then we could initiate the process that Tom outlined after obtaining the information from their presentation. That's what I understood, one. The second thing I understood, and I hope to add clarity on, is that the recommendation for the removal of any member of the commission can come either directly from the mayor or it could come from the majority of the board. And then once that recommendation is made, then we go through that process of the hearing, the 10-day notice, and then obviously we'll have to vote as a board in public about what to do with each individual member. That's my understanding of what's been discussed in the process. Tom, is that accurate?
Yes, I think the thing that changed this is in order to be transparent with the board, I mentioned the other issue that's been brought to our office's concern, and that's what Director Compuris asked me to look into further.
Right, yeah, that's a separate issue, but the process, as I understood it and just outlined it, that's correct to your understanding, right, Tom?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor,
Director Hines, Director, hold on 1 second, Director Hines. Director Warwick, is your hand, are you leaving your hand up or is that your hand up again? If so, then you're next, not Director Hines.
No, I put my hand up again. Thank you.
Director Warwick, then Director Hines.
We had a presentation, I don't know, a couple of months ago from Lita Anthony about what all's happening at the MHA. And one of the things that she talked about was there are a number of the folks that didn't want to leave Chateau. And I don't know if that still is what the status is now or not. So I'd like to have that information. The other thing is, as we have the director and individuals come in and speak to us, I'm really not sure individually what their roles are. So if, and each individual cannot on their own vote for a situation or something to happen. So if they vote for anything, I would think they would be like us, that they would vote as a board. So I'm trying to understand what the individual person on the board is going to bring to us and what questions we're going to have individually for them. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I agree with you.
It would be like someone asking us to come to a meeting and we have you speak and then each one of us speak and then we analyze whether they're doing their job or not doing their job or.
Yeah, I think what this board has to, one, the board, we'll figure out who the person is because it was different a couple years ago than this day, which fine, whatever the rule is, the board, if it's Director Adcock, and I say Director Adcock, she brought it up, has a concern, she can request the MHA Executive Director and ask and visit with her about that concern. That's probably the most advantageous because the MHA Executive Director is running the day-to-day. But there may be some policy issues that Director Adcock has, so she would need to ask the chairperson of that board from a policy perspective, or if there's a specific thing or a specific vote from one of the board members, Director Adcock can ask that specific board member. Members of the board who have specific things, if it's day-to-day, that's more or less with the MHA Executive Director. If it's policy, it's members of the board. But it's up to you all to kind of figure out what you want to ask. I mean, that's kind of.
Do they, I guess my question is, do different commissioners have different roles with it?
I don't know that. I don't know that.
And then the other thing is, whenever they vote, do they not vote as a whole, or are there individual votes? I'm just trying to understand what.
They're just like you all. They vote as a whole.
Vote as a whole, okay. All right.
Yeah, they vote as a whole, so.
And can we find out, the other thing was the number of folks that, I heard that they did not want to leave, that they wanted to stay there. I think that was brought up in our last meeting. And do we still have those individuals that are still there that will not or do not want to leave where they are now? Another question I have is the foreclosure aspects that I read in the newspaper about this. What does that do for the people that live there? What does that do for MHA? What does that do for the city of Little Rock? And maybe Tom could let us know in a memo or something in regards to what our standing or what anybody's standing is if there's a foreclosure involved in that development.
Well, Mr. Moore, if you can get with Mr. Howard to get Director Warwick some reports. Director Hines?
So I want to give everybody a little color here. And this is the same problem that was corrected 8 years ago, I guess, when we didn't take over the board, but we appointed board members that got a mess cleaned up. And we are in the same situation now that we were 8 years ago. MHA has a nonprofit pass-through called Central Arkansas Housing Corporation. That is wherein the problem lies. That board, in every other MHA or housing authority that's out there, the board members that serve on the housing authority also serve on that nonprofit board. And you do have that in a kind of an instance, but the executive director in both cases in most housing authorities operates both entities. Right now, I'm hearing there's no financial accounting back from CAHC to MHA, and MHA is the one who houses CAHC, but CAHC has created their own offices, their own sidebar accounting system, and that's wherein the problem lies and probably the financial mismanagement. It's not really going on in MHA. It's going on at CAHC, Central Arkansas Housing Corporation. Tom, if there are illegalities or financial mismanagement, because the people of that corporation have to work as the officers of that corporation, that nonprofit, have to operate as fiduciaries, correct? So how do we get our hand, and what I understand, and I talked to Brad Walker, who was a former commissioner that cleaned this mess up the last time. He said what MHA ended up having to do was threatened to sue the board members at CAHC, and if because of financial mismanagement that was going on, CAHC at that point decided to turn everything back over to MHA and put things back in order. That's exactly what's happened again. You've got board members that served on MHA are now over there. One of the board members we didn't reappoint, he's not worried because he's over at CAHC directing traffic over there. And that's where the problem lies. Don't get confused. Central Arkansas Housing Corporation is part of Metropolitan Housing Authority. It's on their website. It was created to serve as a pass-through to separate the assets of the physical properties and rent versus the HUD funding for Section 8. It's all done. I mean, and that's where the problem lies. And I don't know how we unwind it, but we're back in the same situation we were 8 or 9 years ago when I first got on the board. And that's where it lies. So everyone understands, Central Arkansas Housing Corporation is part of Metropolitan Housing Alliance. It's just a nonprofit that was set up, and that's where the problem lies. MHA only manages one part of it. In every other housing authority around, the executive director manages both organizations, and the board members serve on both organizations. That is not what is going on right now. We have a board member that we decided not to ratify their reappointment that's over at CHHC. And that's where the deal is. So I don't know how we get a handle on that, Tom, but that's where the problem is. And if there's financial mismanagement going on, what do? Do we report it to the FBI, to the HUD? Who do we report it to? If we win an investigation, if we think there's wrongdoing going on, because that's what it comes down to. And there's been no financial accounting from CAHC back to MHA, which is required. They haven't done an audit in 3 years. For either organization, because the finances are in such shambles because of what was going on. So that's the color. That's what everybody needs to see as far as what's going on in the situation. Everybody keeps pointing the finger, and I think that's what the members of CHHC over there want. They want you to keep pointing the finger at MHA and not looking at them. That's where this request is. And CAHC wants them to continue to give them deeds to property so they can leverage it and borrow money against it. There shouldn't be even any debt at CAHC. They're supposed to operate from the rentals and the HUD rental money they get to operate that nonprofit entity. So, and I think that's, Tom, that's at the end of the day, that's what we need to know. How do we unwind that and get a handle on it? Because it's the same situation, according to Brad Walker, when I talked to him last week, that happened. It's what they cleaned up the last time. We're back in that same situation. I get that it's a state agency, but we do have some strings we can pull. Otherwise, we're going to have the HUD and the federal government here putting that housing authority in receivership. That's the road we're headed down.
Thank you, Director Hines. Director Phillips.
Yes, and I appreciate the passion Director Hines is speaking with. I'm trying to understand. I wasn't here 8 years ago, but it seemed like he was focused on the CAHC matter, but those seem to be so interconnected that you have to address both. Is that correct, Mayor Tom, or someone who was on the board 8 years ago?
I wasn't on the board 8 years ago. I think to add, would you say, color to it, Director Hines, I think at the end of the day, Tom is going to do what he needs to do, but ultimately they are beholden to, well, the board is beholden to being ratified by you all. But from a regulatory compliance standpoint, they adhere to the Little Rock HUD field office and HUD in general. And so that's where all of if something's going to go down, it's going to start there. Where this board plays a role in, if you all want to, if you all, from what I'm hearing, there's maybe some interest in making some changes, that starts at an individual basis per person. Otherwise, it's the Little Rock Field HUD office and the overall HUD department.
Well, and what I want to be clear, I understand that, Mayor, and I appreciate that color. What I want to understand too, though, is the processes that we outlined. I think earlier we were referring to the MHA organization, not the CHC CAHC organization. Is the process the same for that organization as well, or not?
It's my understanding, again, Tom, please chime in. This board doesn't have any governing authority over their board. I'm fairly certain of that.
When you say their board, you're referring to CAHC.
Yeah, what Director Hines mentioned.
Yeah, is that right?
Tom?
I think the answer to your question is if CAHC is doing something that causes concern about the manner in which it's being done, the city has the obligation to report that. And I also think, without being disrespectful, I know a little bit about all this, but I really need to get into the details before I write a memorandum or make a statement.
No, totally agree, Tom. We want to make certain, I don't know if that Director Computers was asking for something to be turned around by next week. And again, I think what Tom just shared, Director Phillips, is clearly the city board, myself, we can report things, but ultimately when it comes to the governing authority, I'm pretty certain they probably govern themselves outside of HUD. I guess HUD probably would be they're kind of a...
Maybe we ought to talk to the HUD office, Tom.
And that might be what I write, but I don't want to make that statement without knowing some things. And to let you understand a little further, the most painful thing in the world, to me, it's not a root canal. It's dealing with the Code of Federal Regulations.
Okay. Well, Mayor, that's what I'm getting at, and I understand and respect Tom if he has to do the research. I just want to make sure that it's clear in whatever is presented to us that we understand. It sounds like that we may have to operate differently because there are different organizations, and our ability to do certain things are different with MHA as opposed to CHAC if we decide to do anything. I just want clarity that if we do one thing that doesn't affect the other or vice versa. That's all I want to clarify. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, members of the board. Director Computers.
This is a good thing. Friday at 2 o'clock, Virgil is dedicating a sculpture at Dunbar Gardens. And if you're around, come and see it.
Will do. All right. Any other comments? Meeting adjourned.